This year, as the National Catholic Register celebrates 90 years in print, making it the oldest national Catholic newspaper in the United States, we will find out from its staff what keeps the presses humming and readership growing among faithful U.S. Catholics who want to stay close to the Church and in touch with the world. But before we do that, we have with us Father Willie Pena, who appears on our Spanish network. He's going to give us a bit of an update as to how the people of Puerto Rico are recovering from the recent hurricanes that swept the island. Father Willie.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here, and sorry about this. You were in the hurricane?
Yes, I was there. I was with my family. I was on vacation in August when Irma went through, and then I went to Puerto Rico, and I was there the days before and through the storm. A Category 5. It has been many, many years since the island had not gone through something like this. It was catastrophic. That's the word.
Yes.
Because everything was destroyed. The complete structure of the island. We have been getting through. We have been relying, and thank God, the United States have helped us a lot since we are a U.S. territory, and Especially Caritas International,
which is a Catholic
relief
service for relief. It's very common in the Middle East.
Yes.
I see it there a lot, and also in this situation.
Yes, in fact, FEMA told us that it has been the major source of help in the island, more than FEMA and more than the Red Cross.
Yeah.
It has been, the church has been there. And it has been a spiritual experience because since we have been without electricity for almost 2 months and a half.
And it's probably going to be another couple of months before it's done. I mean, people don't understand the level of devastation to things like electric wires. Maybe what, January?
Yeah, we have been recording, we had 40%. 40%. They have been doing a very good job. We have been having help from different states. They have sent brigades of people in the different electricity companies. Also Europe, but mostly the United States, the 95%. And we are recovering little by little. At the same time, parish have been a great help. You see here the potential of the parish because we are helping each other in deaneries. And it has been also a spiritual experience because although we still are in a devastated island, 40% electricity, no communications. After the storm, all the towers, 1,200 towers went down.
Yes.
So there was no way of communicating.
And also water was a major problem.
But I would say that it has been an experience in the sense that we have discovered things that we didn't know we are there. Like maybe you had a building, but you never saw it because of the trees. Now there's no trees, so you can see the building. But also we are discovering the potential that human beings have, especially when you have faith. You're discovering the best in you and the worst in you. But I think that the word is discovery. Discovering ourselves, the power of community, neighborhoods, parishes. We're helping each other. Sometimes, you get a little bit isolated, but now we've discovered that we need each other in order to build again the island.
And I think it'd be a good thing for folks to know that if they contribute to the Archdiocese of San Juan, and there are a number, how many dioceses are there?
Six.
Six dioceses. And I'm sure the Archdiocese will coordinate help throughout the island.
Yes.
And your parishes here can help groups like Caritas and the diocese to do the work that gets it done. It's folks discovering, oh, I can do this. Yeah. I don't need the government to come in and do it. We as a Christian family can do that.
Yes, for example, in our parish, we have now a soup kitchen that we are feeding 264 people daily.
Yeah.
And then we have the first pro-life center was in the parish. So we now, apart from guidance and accompanying women during their pregnancy, we are giving out baby food, Pampers, and things like that.
Sure. These are the very concrete, everyday things, and it's good for all of us to be very much involved in helping our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico to recover and make that island as beautiful, if not more beautiful than it was.
That's
Father,
the idea.
Yes. Well,
yeah.
thank you, Father Willie, for giving us the update. We appreciate that and the other work you're doing here in our Spanish network.
It's a pleasure to be part of this family.
God bless you. We are now going to go over to our open, and we'll be ready to have our guests who will talk to us about the National Catholic Register, so please stay with us. Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to get to our regular program. I want to mention at the outset that today is the feast of Saint Albert the Great, one of the very early Dominicans. But not only early, he was one of the truly great Dominicans. In fact, not only did he end up becoming a bishop, but also a doctor of the church. He was born in 1200 during the lifetime of St. Dominic and lived, surprisingly, till 1280. That was a long time in those days. What's wonderful about St. Albert is he was interested in everything. He wanted to study every area of science. He wrote about animal husbandry and chemicals and minerals and whatever he could study, not to mention philosophy and theology. One of the greatest things he did was teach St. Thomas Aquinas. But he was a doctor in his own right, and because he was interested in everything, he is one of the patron saints of science. And we ask that the Lord would bless all of our scientists today through his intercession, so that they too might be able to integrate faith and philosophy, science, and the good of humanity and the glory of God. Well, we have some guests, 3 guests tonight. They are helping a uniquely Catholic newspaper flourish at a time when, in fact, in general, the print media is dying out nationwide. There are lots of newspapers that are going out of business, or they are not being able to print. And from this medium that we have, this newspaper started in 1927, the National Catholic Register branded itself as a Catholic newspaper with, quote, snap, vigor, and courage. You almost think that that's the start of a name of a cereal or something. But it's easy to read, it's always loyal to the church, and has no selfish axe to grind. So here to tell us more, we ask you to welcome the former editor-in-chief, Fran Maier, the blog and social media editor, Kevin Knight, and the current editor-in-chief of the National Catholic Register, Jeanette Demelo. Welcome. Good to have you. Thank you, Kevin. Good to see you. So 90 years. That's a pretty good start.
Oh, I'd say so, yeah. It's an
yeah.
amazing story, really.
Yeah. Which one of you would be the best to tell us about the origins of the National Catholic Register?
Well, it's a fascinating story. Monsignor Smith, when he came, when he went to Denver in 1913 to take over a failing newspaper with, he said there were 1,400 subscribers. It was a table in the back of a cattleman's newsletter office, and they were $4,000 in debt.
No, and that's $4,000 in 1913. That's a lot of money.
They were way over their head. So he borrowed a typewriter from the cattleman, and that fall, he said, he had the very strong feeling that he should start a national newspaper with the circulation of 100,000, 10 times bigger than any Catholic newspaper had achieved to that point. He just had to knock out a couple of obstacles. He was a layman at the time. He had to go to seminary, and he had to deal with the Ku Klux Klan.
Was the Klan in Colorado?
The Klan was strong in Colorado, Indiana, and very much so in Colorado. And
Until 1951.
Right. And he was very instrumental because he was on their radar early. He and several other priests.
This is something I don't think a lot of folks understand.
No.
The Ku Klux Klan is usually associated with the South because it began, I believe, in Tennessee. But it was widespread. The state of Oregon had a very large, influential Ku Klux Klan that made Catholic schools illegal. Connecticut had a big Klan. And as you mentioned, Indiana and lots of other states. This was not just a Southern phenomenon.
No, it wasn't. And he wrote about this. He said it's the first Klan was very much a Southern phenomenon, but this was the second incarnation of the Klan. And it really drew a lot of its strength out of Hollywood. Movie Birth of a Nation.
Yes.
So many of the elements we associate with the Klan now, even the costumes, all of the ceremonies, a lot of those were designed by set designers for that movie. So it just appealed to people the same way Star Wars did.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that Hollywood did the clothing design for the Ku Klux Klan?
Absolutely. That whole aesthetic was drawn from that movie. It was a blockbuster. In the time of silent shorts, it was a 3-hour-long epic movie, and it really captured the imagination of people throughout the nation.
Well, as a matter of fact, the president at that time was one of the most liberal presidents we ever had until very recently. That was Woodrow Wilson, and he loved that movie.
He absolutely loved it. I think he said it was history written in lightning, was his endorsement of the movie. And the effects of that movie, again, it took this and went nationwide, and some of the people who suffered were priests, and of course Catholics were one of the main targets of their anger. One of the cases that really was kind of a shot across the bow, so to speak, at Monsignor Smith was a colleague of his here in Birmingham. He was
Father Coyle?
Father Coyle, exactly. Monsignor Smith talked about this case a lot. He talked about the shooting. Monsignor Coyle was...
So our audience may not know all. We've done programs on it, but tell us just real briefly what the story of Father Coyle.
Father Coyle, he witnessed a wedding. He had a wedding between a young woman and a young man in Birmingham.
And then, he had baptized the woman.
Right, he had baptized the woman, Ruth. Her father was angered at this. He showed up at the rectory an hour later and shot Father Coyle to death.
Yeah, his father was a Methodist minister who, while Father was saying his divine office, shot him at prayer.
Right, and here's where the Register and Monsignor Smith come into this. The defense attorney in that case, of course, the Klan rallied, and they got a Klan attorney to...
Hugo Black.
And his career was really launched with this case. He gained notoriety. Monsignor Smith knew that he had to document these untold stories that, like Hugo Black, once he became senator for 2 terms, was eventually in 1937 became a Supreme Court justice.
Again, so folks understand, Hugo Black was elected as a senator who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan
Right.
from Alabama.
Right.
And then in 1936, when President Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, expanded the Supreme Court, he appointed this Klansman to the Supreme Court.
Right, and he had the National Catholic Register fighting him every step of the way.
Yes.
Because the murder on the street is one thing, and then for this cultural tide to sweep out of it, he knew that people needed to be told the truth. And this couldn't be done in any other way than journalism, in just an ongoing and incessant pursuit of the truth.
Something that folks also should know about Hugo Black and why it is so important for Catholic media to pursue this. The same Hugo Black is the Supreme Court justice who in 1947 introduced the principle of separation of church and state,
Right.
based on a letter by Thomas Jefferson, but not on the Constitution. And that was done to stop Catholic school children from getting rides on the school buses in New Jersey.
Right, and Monsignor Smith and his early colleagues, they knew that ideas had consequences.
Yep.
And they knew that they saw how short the memory of our nation was for a KKK defense lawyer to rise to such heights. And he knew, of course he always knew, but with the culture not being our friend, he knew that something had to be done. And so in 1927, November 8th, 1927, he founded the National Catholic Register.
Excellent. Yeah, because Black was elected to the Senate in the 20s. Was it the
Right,
24?
just before that, I think 24 or
26?
26.
Yeah, 24, 26. And then President Roosevelt appointed him to the Supreme Court. The close connection between, the Ku Klux Klan and very liberal presidents like Roosevelt and Wilson is very important to understand.
Right.
That they may have been liberal on some policies, but they were not liberal and not correct on issues of race or religious freedom.
And they were dead set against the Catholic Church.
Yep. Some things haven't changed.
Nope. And the Klan melted away in the 1920s, just on the eve of the Register's founding. And that's one of the things that cleared the way, because they also pursued Monsignor Smith, trying to keep him from pursuing this work. They hired private detectives, tried to frame him. Around the nation, he documented other cases of priests being called out to sick calls that turned out to be fake sick calls, and they were murdered. And he suspects that almost happened to him on one occasion. So he knew the environment, and he knew how to survive in that. Now, in 1926 or so, they just collapsed nationwide, but that stream was still there, and of course the stream that propelled Hugo Black and 10,000 others like him into the cultural mainstream. They weren't they didn't so much vanish from the face of the earth as they were assimilated into the culture.
See, this is an important element of understanding why a Catholic media is so important, to shine light into the darkness of evil. Racism is evil, and religious bigotry is evil. And that's exactly what they were able to do with this newspaper.
Well, they were, because Monsignor Smith's colleagues in the secular press, he talked to them privately. They were all afraid of the Klan, and they knew how evil the Klan, they knew their designs. They knew how dangerous they were even to our democracy.
Yep.
But they were all afraid. They had no courage. And they also, he said, didn't have the sanity that comes with having solid philosophy and divine revelation on your side. So he knew that the press, not just the Catholic press, not just a little side thing, but the press itself we had to restore this sanity to the press, and this clear-mindedness and this courage.
And how long did Monsignor Smith stay with the press?
He was there until his
Register?
death in 1960.
1960.
So he was there through the Depression, World War II, and the Cold War, the early years of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Some big years.
And at its height, Monsignor Smith had 850,000 copies of the Register going all over the country, and this was through the Register system of newspapers. So he worked with dioceses and bishops throughout the country to spread the newspaper there. So there was a system of newspapers that he enabled.
Now, Fran, you used to be the editor.
Yes, I did.
At what
15
point
years.
At what point did you get on the staff?
I came on in early September of '78.
So there were other editors between Monsignor and you.
Patrick Riley was my predecessor. And I joined in '78. Paul VI had died in August. John Paul I had just been elected 10 days earlier. And then about a month later, John Paul II was elected. And that really became the North Star for the way that we handled things for the next 15 years, the thinking of Carol Wojtyła. And the problems that we faced were quite different from the ones that Kevin has articulated. You remember the confusion after the council. I mean, that was...
Remember it. Some people accuse me of causing some of it, but go on.
Well, it was a time when there was a huge amount of uncertainty and conflict within the church, and to some degree that continues now, obviously. But with the election of Carol Wojtyła, you had a man who was both profoundly faithful, deeply faithful, and devotional in his religion, and an absolutely sterling intellect. And so that kind of inspired the way that we handled things. We wanted to be a paper that would be genuinely faithful and prayerful, and at the same time really appeal to people who wanted an intelligent encounter with the world. And that allowed us to create an environment over the 15 years where we became a magnet for really an entire generation of thinkers in the church and writers, reporters, that sort of thing. So it was just an exhilarating 15 years. It was one of the, it's the kind of thing that you look back on and are just really grateful for that kind of experience in your life.
Yeah, that was an incredibly exciting change that took place. Pope Paul VI had been very sick with cancer for the last, about 5 years of his life or
Yes.
so. And there was a weakness physically that afflicted him. He was an amazing man.
I don't think he ever recovered, though, from the backlash that he endured after Humanae Vitae. That was that was a very, very difficult emotional experience for him.
I think not only the backlash from Humanae Vitae, but also he felt totally betrayed when he opened up the way for priests to leave the ministry. And then he was dumbfounded at the wave of people that took up. He was totally blindsided by that. And I think one of his words was, "They betrayed me."
I think, Father, that's one of the things, having lived through that period like you. I mean, there was just a hijacking of the idea of the church being open to the world and essentially losing her sense of mission and evangelical zeal in the process, at least among American Catholics. And that was one of the issues we
Western
dealt with.
Catholics in general.
Yeah.
It affected Europe, Australia, North America.
But we dealt with that. That was one of the formative experiences of working at the Register at the time, was to, John Paul II was, I like to say, in a centrifugal age, he was a centripetal force. He brought things together. If you reread Redemptoris, not Redemptoris Mater, but Redemptor Hominis, that's an anthropology, a vision of man that really kind of informed the entire way we worked for 15 years.
And I think it was important that both he and Pope Benedict XVI had been young men actively participating in the Vatican Council, and that Wojtyła had been extremely active and vigorous in implementing the council in Kraków.
Right.
People think, oh, the Polish Catholics, they're sort of conservative. That wasn't it at all. He really integrated that, and throughout his papacy, kept the same program of integration of Vatican II in every encyclical, every apostolic exhortation.
You know, the other thing that Kevin said, he made the comment that ideas have consequences. And I think both of those men, John Paul II and Benedict XVI, embodied that. They really understood the importance of faith and reason, the importance of having a deep faith life and a vigorous intellectual life, an ability to think, not just feel. And there are times these days when that's just lacking in a lot of Catholics. They confuse.
Catholics?
Well,
What about the secular people?
right?
I mean, we're talking dumb.
Yeah. They don't know how to think.
Historically ignorant and philosophically incompetent.
And see, that's why, and Jeanette can speak to this, but that's why a printed publication is so important, because you can't be educated unless you read. I'm not against these other technologies, but that is a really important factor.
It is indeed. I mean, it's hard that we're continuing to print this, because, as you said in the beginning, it's hard to stay alive in this age with print publications, but that's why we continue to have it. That's why EWTN took this up and has continued to do it, because reading the printed word does something different to your brain than communicating in 140 characters or less.
I mean, how do you communicate the faith in 140 characters with any kind of depth? I'm not knocking the technology, because it does have its uses, but Catholics are supposed to think, not simply feel. The two things go together.
Well, that's certainly, we are living at a time when strong expression of my feelings is far more authoritative, or else. I've said this to folks, the way that the improper language, the foul language that permeates the internet and Twitter, etc., all these very bad words that you figure out even when they show the blotted out parts in the, that they leave enough first letters and spaces to figure out that these people need their mouths washed out with a lot of soap. And my mother gave soap that made you want to stop doing that. But it's because they use it as punctuation instead of knowing grammar. And they use emotion rather than knowledge and insight. And this makes people come off as very, very foolish. You know, we just saw a couple weeks ago that in response to the horrendous killings at the church in Texas, how many people were saying, no, don't pray. You know, one of the Hollywood actors said, don't pray. God answered them with bullets.
Wow.
You express an evil thought like that in using your emotions instead of how do I present a thoughtful, reflective, and uplifting message. You don't get blogs in the National Catholic Register.
Well, we do have blogs, but they go along with the National
They're
Catholic.
blogs
Not
in the paper. Well, that's what I mean. You don't have them in the paper.
You're right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
people blog, but that's
right.
someplace else.
I think as a former editor, seeing Jeanette take the paper to a new dimension is really enormously satisfying, because I think Jeanette brings to the paper and the Register as it's embodied now a kind of sensitivity as well as the traditional intellectual depth that the paper used to have and does have now. And that's, as an ex-editor, that's wonderful to see that's still part of the tradition.
Sure. Well, we need to take a break just about now. So what I'd like to do is get to you, Jeanette, because you are now the editor, is that right?
That's right.
And editor-in-chief.
That's right.
And you have a lot of other folks working for you.
We do.
And so we'll see what the chief has to say. I mean, I start to feel like Clark Kent, you know. All right, chief. Well, actually, I'd be more like Jimmy. So we'll be back in just a couple of minutes and find out more about what's going on at this Catholic national newspaper, the National Catholic Register. Right, welcome back. We want to make an offer you shouldn't refuse. That's the Chicago in me. It's for a 6-issue free trial of the National Catholic Register to be delivered to your mailbox. You can call 1-800-421-3230. That's 1-800-421-3230. When you call, mention our secret code. Only the people watching this or listening on radio know this. The secret code, get your little decoder ring, is 9TV. 9TV. Or you can go online to ncregister.com/TV. ncregister.com/TV. Well, Jeanette Demelo, we have questions for you now. You are presently the editor, as we talked about in the first half of the show. Have you just sort of said, look, I'm young, I'm just going to have a revolution and just overthrow everything these guys have done in the past? Is that what you did?
Not at all. So I've been at the Register for 5 years, and Fran was gracious to speak about me so highly, but really I've been formed in many ways by Fran Maier. I worked with him at the Archdiocese of Denver.
Okay.
And so worked
with... And again, Denver is where the Register is headquartered.
That's right, which is really quite remarkable. I mean, I never imagined that I would be living here in Birmingham working for the National Catholic Register, but I was the general manager of the Denver Catholic Register, and Monsignor Smith first ran the Denver Catholic Register, and it was from the Denver Catholic Register that he went national with the National Catholic Register in 1927. So, you know, it's really all kind of providential, but yes, I took the newspaper over 5 years ago, the first editor-in-chief under EWTN, and here we are today.
Now, did anybody ever tell you why EWTN got involved in this?
Sure.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Sure. Well,
what
of
is
course.
Because so folks understand, EWTN now owns and you know, is the mothership for this media, along with many other of the media work we do in radio, television, and internet. Now we also have a newspaper.
Exactly.
Why
So-
did EWTN do that?
Why did EWTN do that? Well, of course, between Fran's years, when the Frawley family owned the Register, and the years that EWTN bought it, Circle Media owned the Register. And at that time, Circle Media, which was owned by the Legionaries of Christ, was going through a very rough time with their founder and the scandal related to him. But also, newspapers at the time, I mean, they were closing left and right. It was a very, very tough time for the economy and for newspapers. So the Register was really struggling to stay afloat. Dan Burke was hired by Circle Media around that time, I think 2008, 2009, hired by Circle Media to try to save the newspaper, to try to save the publishing house, Circle Media. And he really did some reforms to the paper that would help control expenses and to keep it afloat. But he realized he was not going to be able to do that under Circle Media, that there would need to be a new owner, a new publisher.
So Circle Media was not able to sustain the newspaper.
That's right. And everyone recognized that it was something that should continue. And so they came to EWTN through the help of Fran, who was consulted at the time as a former editor, said, how can we keep this alive? And through the help of Fran, through the help of Archbishop Chaput, and many others, I think, who consulted
Who, by the way,
over
is
this.
still a member of the Board of Trustees
Right.
for
That's right.
EWTN. So that was a good connection.
I think the Archbishop saw, well, first of all, the Archbishop had huge confidence in Jeanette because of the work that she was doing for him at the time. And then he just saw a serendipitous relationship between EWTN and the National Catholic Register, particularly as EWTN expanded its reach and its vision for communications. National Catholic Register and Jeanette were a natural fit. So
Absolutely. And so that was in 2011. And then I joined the team not too long after that, in 2012. And so I've been doing it ever since. Of course, Dan Burke is still our executive director. Michael Warsaw is our publisher. And we are so grateful that, we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for EWTN, if it wasn't for Dan Burke and Michael pressing forward. And it was really, it's miraculous in a sense that we are still alive as a print product. So
Well, you're not merely alive.
we're thriving.
I was going to say, haven't you expanded?
We have. So we're at our highest circulation in the last 17 years. And the print subscriptions have increased 100% under EWTN. So it's just absolutely amazing. But I mentioned that Monsignor Smith had 850,000 people reading the Register through the diocesan system. Today, our online readership is twice that. So the page views is twice that amount, and then another twice that on Facebook. So we are really getting this news out to the nation and beyond, really.
Yeah. See, this is an important element because we're also at a time when the news media as a whole, the secular news media, is becoming more diversified than it had been. It had been pretty monolithic when there were just 3 networks that did the news. There was some news and public broadcasting, but that was still fairly minor. And now the internet has opened up lots of sources, some of which are sources of tremendous fake news. And then there's the cable television networks, some of which are also purveyors of fake news. And this is, when you see that, do you get accused of doing much fake news?
Not at all, really. I mean, we don't get accused of doing fake news. I think people can accuse us, especially in the contentious climate we live in today, of focusing on the negative or that kind of thing. That can happen, but that's false too, because they don't see the whole product. I mean, we've got a wonderful Culture of Life section where it's all features. It's all wonderful features about the good works going on in the church, about evangelization and all of that, not only in the paper, but it's online too. But You know, people can, in this media climate, they can see one stream of news through their Facebook or through Twitter and not see the whole thing that we offer, the whole product that we offer. That's a huge challenge for me. That's a huge challenge for my team that works so hard to put this together and then put the website together, because we think a lot about where we want to place things on the website. But people don't always see the news first here or on the website. They see it in their Twitter feed, or they see it in something that was forwarded or liked by a friend on Facebook. So,
And there are a couple problems. One is that people who read on the internet in particular do what they call F reading. It's modeled on the capital letter F. The first line is long, they read the whole first line. And then the second line of the letter F is shorter, about half that. And then it's a stem, and that just sort of glancing over.
First paragraph, right?
And yeah, you read the first paragraph, part of the second, and then very little of the rest. Do you see people
Absolutely, that
doing
happens
that?
all the time. And you know, I've been looking through the archives a lot lately, because we've been, you know, producing this this special edition that has some clips from the archives. I've been looking through the archives, and I got to some of the years that Fran was editor, 1990, 1991, and I was looking at these pages through the books. By the way, we're not digital, so I'm really hoping that we can go digital with these archives. But I'm looking through these pages, and Fran did something very, very interesting, and I'm thinking of adapting it to our pages now, or to online particularly. It was the facts and the impact. And so after the title, he put these 2 bullet points, basically, that were the facts and the impact of the story. Because it was happening then, in 1990, people were doing the same F reading, you know. And, but it happens today all the time. People don't even read the whole story, and then they'll start emailing me or commenting, and you can tell they didn't even read the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
So,
I taught university and high school. I know what you mean.
yeah.
They didn't read the whole book.
Right, right.
Or the article. So this is important. And then the second element too is, you know, especially with, I've noticed it with reporting on Pope Francis, so frequently things that he says, a little, not even a sound bite, it's a half bite. You know, it's just tiny little phrase taken out of its context.
Sure.
And I imagine that you have to do a lot of work of trying to put it back into context.
Absolutely.
And showing the original sources.
Absolutely, we do have to do that a lot. With not only Pope Francis, it happens with President Trump. It happens, you know, it happens all the time now.
Yeah.
You know, but we do work very closely with the Catholic News Agency team in Rome.
Well, tell us, who knows most about the Catholic News Agency?
We can talk about Catholic News Agency.
Right, what's
sure.
going on with Catholic News Agency?
So Catholic News Agency is now also a part of the EWTN family. They produce news daily, and they produce...
How much does it cost to start getting it?
The Catholic News Agency, $0. So it's a free news agency.
Okay, so if somebody wants to get, you know, fresh news from a news agency, you don't have to register with some big corporation. You get it for free.
Exactly. So the Catholic News Agency does that. They produce the news, and even parishes, dioceses can use this news. They can print it. So that's a little different from us.
How much do you charge a diocese for using it?
They charge them nothing. They charge them nothing. So it's beautiful. A Catholic News Agency is doing a wonderful service. Again, just recently, in the last year or so, part of the EWTN family. But they serve us a lot. They produce a lot of stories that we use constantly. And so extremely grateful for the work, the partnership that we have with them.
And Archbishop Chaput was also very involved in founding that. I mean, he enabled Alejandro Bermudez and others to find the resources and base the operation originally in the Archdiocese offices in Denver. And then, of course, it grew to where it is now.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I like is one of the old timers around here at EWTN. It'll be almost 34 years that I've been doing programs here at EWTN.
That's amazing.
That's adding up now. But one of the things that I see as consistent is that Mother Angelica did not take the business model of cable of the early 80s, which was, we'll do programming, and then every subscriber would pay for that particular channel. For every channel you wanted extra, you paid another $1 or $2 a month in those days. Now they pay more. And that was the model. It's still used by HBO and Showtime and other of the prime networks. Her attitude came from the gospel. You put it out there. You give it away and let the Lord take care of you. And she and Ted Turner had the same idea at the same time. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, they both. He had the same idea that CNN would start off, just give it, it's a freebie on your cable package. And she had done something independently of him. And it became an anchor gift. It was just a gift. That's how we do radio still.
Sure.
We had the radio convention last week. We give the radio signal away. We give the television signal away. We don't charge anybody. And the CNA's following, the Catholic News Agency follows the same approach.
Absolutely. That's the approach they have. And I know, I mean, it would be wonderful if we could give this product away. The printing is so expensive to do, but you know, it's a gift to continue to print this product. I mean,
it's a beautiful product.
It's a really beautiful product.
Really beautiful.
But people have asked us, why don't we go online to some sort of pay service? Because a lot of newspapers are doing that today.
I know.
The Wall Street Journal, you have to pay to look at some of their articles online. The New York Times is going that way too. Yeah. We won't do that. I mean, our news will continue to be free on the website, of course. And part of it is because of that desire Mother Angelica had, who after Michael Warsaw made us a part of the family, one of the nuns told him that Mother Angelica always wanted a newspaper. So I think we're still continuing to fulfill one of her dreams. So.
Yes, she really was like Pope St. John Paul, someone who did not have a rear view mirror.
No.
In her vehicle. She's just going forward, and even, the line when somebody who worked here met Pope John Paul, and I said, "Oh, Mother Angelica, she very strong woman." He had his run-ins with her too.
Absolutely.
But it was that vision forward on the principles of the gospel that you have here.
Absolutely. I hope we carry her vision out. That's what we intend to do. Always catechizing. I mean, that's one thing that we learn well from Monsignor Smith, who was always catechizing, but also from Mother Angelica. I mean, that was a part of her mission, And so we report the news. I'm looking at something right here on the death penalty debate, So we're going to report what's going on in that world, but we're also going to report what the Catechism teaches. We're going to report what history of the Church has taught on this subject. That's a part of who we are, is always catechizing.
Yes, yes. Well, that'll be very important, because we also have a strong need to apply the catechism in the concrete situations of the world we live in. The catechism isn't for a long time ago. I had somebody send me an email that said, "Well, my pastor said, oh, we don't listen to St. Paul. He wrote from a long time ago."
Oh, wow. Wow.
I had a little bit of a disagreement with the pastor on that.
Sure.
and gave some of my own clarifications. But we do use ancient truth and apply it in the contemporary world. That's what I see you doing.
Absolutely.
With the newspaper and the Catholic News Agency and the other media that you're using. The truth is ancient, but it's ever fresh in these new circumstances, and given the idiocy of some of the thought or pseudo thought that we see being passed out in other places in the media. It's refreshing.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know I should not hold back like that, right? What do you see as the next direction, the next stage of what you want to do?
That's a really good question. I mean, as I mentioned, we're in a media climate that can be very challenging because we keep adding media, right? I mean, we're still printing the newspaper. We have the website. We added blogs to the website. We have Facebook. We have I have a radio show, Register Radio on EWTN.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
We keep.
When is that on, by the way?
It's on the weekends. So.
So weekend is Register Radio.
Right.
Sunday morning, isn't it?
7 p.m. Eastern on Saturday and Sunday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I've heard it on Sunday morning locally on the way back from church.
Right. So we keep adding media. We have the same wonderful team of editors and reporters. Most of my reporters, by the way, are freelancers. The challenge is always finding people who want to report and not just comment. We have a lot of people who want to give opinions, right? But not a lot of people who want to do solid reporting where you give a balanced point of view and what's going on both sides, that kind of thing. But as Fran was talking about earlier, like staying connected to the paper, like to reading, to thoughts, to going deep, because it's so easy just to read the headline. It's so easy to read in that F form and not really allowing your intellect to be engaged. The emotions arise. You get in the comment box and you start a sort of emotional battle, right? And we have to figure out, we have to keep going with bringing our readers deeper and deeper into thinking about what's going on in the church today and applying what we know, the truth of the church, to the world today. And we're going to continue to try to do the same mission that Monsignor Smith started so long ago, but in this new media world. And it's a challenge.
You know, there's always an opportunity to lose heart in a time when so many of the signals in a culture are pessimistic. And I think one of the great functions of the Register is to provide an intelligent basis for hope for people. You read the Register and you can be reinvigorated and confident in the faith, and you can engage your mind as well as your heart, and those two things are very powerful when they're working in sync.
Absolutely.
And something that as you mentioned, I wrote for you in the past, and also I wrote for other Catholic publications, newspapers and magazines, and I urge people to do that. People will sometimes, when I go to conferences, I feel like Sir Thomas More walking out of court. Father Mitch, here's my book, here's my CD, here's my DVD. I feel like I'm getting these petitions, and my advice is always to try and start publishing in a newspaper. Let your skills be honed with the help of an editor.
Absolutely.
Don't edit your own books. I don't read them if you edit it yourself or if you're self-published. I don't read it. I won't. I just don't. I don't have time because I start correcting the grammar and it drives me nuts. Drive her nuts.
I do welcome writers who are willing to be edited and who want to report. I mean, those are.
But that's another thing the point that you've made many times. I mean, one of the functions of the Register is to provide friendship and comradeship for developing talent.
Yes.
You know, and that it's not just a question, you rightly correct, one of the key features is that when you publish, you get edited, you develop your byline, people get to know you. But it's not all about you. It's about the friendship and the team that you build with other people. And the editor is one of the facilitators of that, and Jeanette does a great job of that.
That's exactly. And editors are your friend. When you're too long, or you use the passive voice too much.
Oh, that's criminal.
Oh, it is. It is. It's boring. So they'll help you with that. And or off with your head. So be the Queen of Hearts. Off with his head. And just that's a great way to get involved, and I want to urge people to do that. Let me give a little bit of the information so that if you want to find out more about the National Catholic Register, you can go to ncregister.com. And you can take up our offer for 6 free copies, 6 editions, and see if you like it. And if you don't like it, then don't order anymore. But if you do, you can make that order. I want to thank all of you for the work you've done and work you're still doing. We appreciate it. And I want to give you all a blessing. May Almighty God bless you and keep you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And want to urge you to keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. Because we have a lot of bills, not only from paying for the television and the radio and the internet, but now the newspaper. And your generosity helps us to evangelize so many people. God bless you and thank you.